Well, most of the world has been spared from seeing firsthand the horrific aftermath of the October 7 attacks, when Hamas tortured, raped and murdered over 1,000 innocent civilians in Israel. But for those who have been on the ground, it can only be described as harrowing. Terrorism expert and former US presidential envoy Marshall Billingslea just spent a week at the site of the massacre, and he says after decades in counter-terrorism, he's never seen anything as barbaric. Marshall, thank you so much for your time. What did you see?
Erin, it's good to be with you. I wish it were under happier circumstances. But yes, we, three of us from the previous Trump administration had the opportunity to visit Israel for discussions with the government, as well as with a number of former government officials and NGOs, think tanks, and so on. Part of our visit was both to the south and opposite of Gaza, where fighting is ongoing and was ongoing while we were there. And we also visited the border with Lebanon in the north, which I can also speak to. But the bottom line is the atrocities committed by really three different waves of Hamas operatives and Palestinians who came in behind the attacks to loot, truly horrific. These poor, truly innocent people were caught sleeping. They attacked very early in the morning. They knew exactly where they were going and who they were out to kill because they had used Palestinian workers who had been provided work permits to work in the kibbutz. They'd use them as spies to map out the locations, which houses had, where were the safe rooms on the houses, which houses had weapons, where the bunkers and the armories were. So they went in on a hunting expedition to commit genocide.
Groups like ISIS, you use the word barbaric, they are barbaric to the extreme. We've seen so many atrocities committed in their name. What made this the worst that you've seen? What particular element of it?
It's actually very, very similar to the way Daesh, ISIS behaved, and the sheer scale of the atrocities. I mean, they killed more than 1,200 people, and then took several hundred hostage. But the nature of the killing, the rape, the murder of babies and kindergartners, the summary execution of elderly, the torching of bodies beyond recognition to the point where, in some cases, people could only be identified by a tooth, and the gleefulness with which they went about the murder. I would say I sat through a 47-minute video that the Israeli Defense Forces have compiled from hours and hours and hours of terrorist GoPro videos, cell phone videos, videos of the victims themselves as they're hiding in dumpsters or hiding in safe rooms. Most did not survive. CCTV footage, dash cam footage, I mean, you name it, as well as signals intelligence intercepts from phone calls of Hamas terrorists calling their parents and gleefully celebrating about the fact that they just murdered 2 or 5 or 10, they called them Israeli dogs, and to hear the parents cheering them on with jubilation. To see the footage, some of which has been posted on the internet, to see the footage of how both prisoners and corpses were then taken into Gaza and treated by the quote-unquote civilians. It really, you use that word, Erin, you use the word harrowing. That's really the case.
A final question. I've been absolutely appalled, starting with the day after the attacks, people taking to the streets, not pro-Palestinian, but celebrating what Hamas did, and the movement that seems to have formed over the past few months that doesn't even seem to acknowledge what happened on October 7, let alone, the pain of hostages and families who still have people in Gaza. Does it surprise you or shock you, or what's been your reaction to the global reaction?
It is shocking. In fact, it's so shocking, Erin, that I've actually compared notes with friends of mine. You know, I was in the Pentagon on 9/11, serving in the Department of Defense. In fact, I was on the side of the building that Al Qaeda actually had intended to hit. I was briefing the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Paul Wolfowitz, at the time. We saw none of this hate-filled reaction after 9/11, but the scale and the vitriol and just the venom of these pro-Hamas, pro-genocide protesters, it is stunning. And I, you know, I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, and I can't speak to all of the root causes, but I would say many of our democracies have a real problem on their hands if this is the kind of a reaction that kind of attack provokes. Certainly here in the United States, we're quite concerned, and the FBI is quite concerned about the potential for terrorist attacks here as well.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely terrifying, and it's a fear that we share here in Australia. Marshall Billingslea, thank you so very much for your time and for sharing, and also for going yourself. That wouldn't have been easy, but I think it is so important that we continue to talk about what happened on that day.
Indeed, Erin, and we need to continue to support the government of Israel as they deal with this most difficult situation and as they face an imminent threat from Hezbollah in the north.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.